bluegrasscomp.com, and then you click on the shop link. All right, without further ado, our December meeting is Leading Change, How to Be a Successful Change Agent in Challenging Times. And today we have with us Dr. Hope Zoeller, who's founder and president of Hope. Her firm specializes in facilitating leader success at every level of an organization. For over 14 years of her professional career, Dr. Zoeller worked at UPS in various roles. For the past 15 years, she's been consulting with organizations on leadership development. She's also a professor at Spalding University, teaching organizational development and change in the Master of Business Communication program. She has a doctorate in leadership education from Spalding University, a Master of Education in Training and Development from the University of Louisville, and a Bachelor of Arts in Communications and Psychology from Bellarmine University. She also co-authored Hope for Leadership's Unabridged with Dr. Joe DeCinci. With that, we'd like to welcome Hope today, and we're so happy to have her back.
Thank you.
Yes, and if, sorry, real quick, if anyone doesn't have the form that's currently showing on the screen that we shared previously, put your email in a chat and I will send it to you. And I'm now going to stop the share and turn it over to Dr. Zoeller.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, you should be able to share now.
All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. And, as I'm sitting there listening to the introduction, truly, I can't think of a better teacher, a better marketer of change than the year 2020 itself, because so many things have happened this year to each one of us. I don't know anybody that hasn't been touched by, since March, of having to learn how to do things in a new way, just the way that we're meeting now, for example, for today. I mean, my business 100% pivoted from in-person to doing these virtual experiences. So what we're going to talk today about is, as leaders, especially HR professionals, because I really look to the HR professional world, which I have worked in when I was at UPS, and now I so closely collaborate with now in the leadership development world, as really those that are some of the most important individuals to help lead change in our organizations, and then to help be that model for leaders in organizations to also be that change. So I got to thinking about, and please do use the chat. We're going to be taking a look and monitoring that. So it's a great way when we can't be together to have conversations with one another. And there will be a bit of time at the end if you have any questions that you can feel free to put in the chat as well. But I got to thinking, what is the most challenging change that you personally have experienced and why? And, as I've already said, for many of us this year probably would come to mind with that. For some of us, it may be years past when we've gone through job changes or relationship changes. But when I think about change and in the world that I'm in now with leadership development and helping leaders through that, I find that most people will initially resist it. They don't welcome it always. They don't love it. They often, think about the things the way they used to be and how I want to go back to that. And, this year, again, alone has been everybody can't wait to go back, especially in Kentucky, wait to go back inside a restaurant to eat indoors again. But why is it that we so greatly resist it? Because often what we find is once we've gotten through it, it is always generally better than it was before. But it's that ultimate resistance. So it made me think about my brother-in-law, Patrick, who's an amazing chef. And, he will be constantly challenging us to try new things. Well, if he asked me to try something that I've tried before and I didn't like, I will graciously say, no, thank you. I've had that before and I don't like it. And he will say to me, you haven't had it prepared well. And I'm like, well, no, I've had it. He said, no, you have not had it prepared well. I challenge you to try it and you tell me now if you like it. And I will tell you on the upside of 99% of the time, I do. And so when I think about change, I think about change in that way, is that initially we resist it because so many of us have gone through change poorly done. And so what I hope to provide to you today are really just some practical tips on how we can lead change in such a way that we offer it to people that have gone through things before and not liked it, but they're at least willing to try it. And once people are willing to try it, then it's much easier to persuade them to come along and get them to move to where they need to be. So these are some statistics I found particularly interesting. And I think why it's important to understand this is for context. And if you are going to help move change, you have to understand why it fails. And so this was a survey that was done by Towers Watson. And what they found, just looking at this is pretty much only half of the time organizations felt that they had successfully gone through a change effort or a change initiative. And only 25% of the change management projects were judged to have sustained their original objectives. So 55 felt that the objectives hadn't even been met. And then only 25% felt that any of them at all had actually succeeded. And, this is an interesting and often, frustrating one for me, because I live what you're looking at on the screen right now in organizations. And, I point to you more so to the 68% of senior managers understanding the reasons for the change project. Only 53% of middle managers, when you're going through change in an organization, understand it. So then you keep going, and only 40% of the front line that is going to have to be living it, your team leaders, your supervisors, only 40% understand why we're doing the change. So then by the time you get to your front line, you can almost see that this is a setup for not a successful change effort initiative. And I will say to you that this is one of the biggest challenges, is not everybody being on board with what the change is about, or better yet, understanding why. Why are we going through this change? Because if you don't have this understanding at the top levels, it is almost impossible to be able to successfully transform your organization into where you want them to be. So I wanted to give you some additional information on why organizational change fails. And I'm going to ask that you share this with each other in the chat of which one of these have you experienced in your own organization, or maybe in a past organization. Which couple of ones can you say, oh my gosh, I've absolutely lived this one. The first one is misstart. We get all excited about the change and we want to do it and we start running with it, but we haven't really thought through all the things that it's going to take to make it successful. Like, how are we going to communicate this to every level of leadership? How are we going to get them the resources that they need, the training that they need? We just implement, we just go. And when we do that, when we haven't thought through our plan, that can ultimately cause the change initiative to fail. Making change an option. I've seen this time and time again in an organization where they will come up with a new process for something, but they allow people to use the old process if they want to. And so if people have a choice, and we've already talked about the given, if people have a choice to not change, most people will stay with the tried and the true because it's comfortable and I don't have to work as hard at it. And I'm guaranteed somewhat level of success because I've already been doing it. Focusing only on the process, because as HR people, if we're only focusing on the process, we're leaving out one of the most important things that HR is responsible for, and that's the people. So yes, we have to look at the process, but we also have to look at how is this going to impact the people? And this is really where I see HR coming in as a critical partner in change initiatives. And if your organization is going through, which so many are right now, I mean, just with having to come up with how to work in a COVID world, depending on your culture, depending on your environment. But HR should always have a seat at the table in these conversations, because I really do look to this group of individuals, and I include myself in part of that, is really helping make sure the organization is focusing on the right things with change. Then we only focus on results, and it goes back similarly to the process. If we only are worried about how we're going to get there, we're not worried about who this could take down as a result of doing that. Again, we have to look at how is this going to impact the entire organization. If I had to, and these are not ranked from like this is number 1 to this is number 2, they're in a random order. But if I had to tell you from my experience in this industry, number 5 comes to the top most often, is not involving those expected to implement the change in the change. Now, I've gotten pushback when I work, with the executive levels of, look, Hope, that's all grandiose, but we can't sit every employee down and say, here's what's going to be, and what are your feelings? What are your emotions about that? That's not exactly what I'm saying here. I'm saying that if there's going to be a significant impact on a group of individuals with this change, then you should have at least a small sample of people from that group that have a say in how this is going to be, or at least you talk to them and you ask them, if we were to do this, how would this impact you? Because as I said, when I go into organizations, I see rarely will the right people be involved that are going to have to implement and live this. And so after the change comes out, of course there's resistance because it hasn't been done well. and they're giving feedback in that, that 11th hour of, look, this isn't going to work. We do the job every day. If you would have asked me maybe at, the 3rd hour, I could have told you this and we could have together worked to come up with a better, more solid plan. So when you're going through change, make sure you are involving those that are going to have to implement it. Delegated to outsiders, which, formerly I was an internal person when I worked at UPS with this change. Now I'm kind of like an informal outsider that will just give advice. I find that the marrying of the two is the best. When you can have, your formal people inside the organization that play the role for it, and then you can have some external people that come in and will challenge the processes, will challenge the end results, will ask the right questions of, do you have all the people involved for that? But when you only delegate it to outsiders, I've also seen this happen, and I'm sure you can relate to this in some aspect. It's like the outsiders come in, they change everything, and they leave because leadership in general doesn't want to be associated with rocking people's world, especially if it doesn't go well. But they can blame the outside. Well, the outsiders came in and shook all this up. And I hear people say that inside organizations all the time. I said it inside my own organization. I was at UPS. It's that blah, blah firm that came in, and days were good before they came in and said something to us, or before they changed everything. So again, number 6, it's not bad to have that external. I highly recommend it, but you also need to have an internal party that can work together to implement change. And no change in the reward system. If we're asking people to do things differently, to show up differently, we need to make sure that there is some reward for them. And this doesn't always have to be in a monetary value. This doesn't always have to be an increase in salary. But what are we doing to recognize people who are helping us take this change forward? Number 8. Number 5, I told you was really important. All of these are really important, but number 8 shines a bright light on the reason why change fails too, is that leadership doesn't walk the talk. We tell everybody else that we need to do something, and then we see some of the key influential people not doing it. We all need to be doing it and supporting it. And especially in the HR roles, we should be a seat at the table, and we should also be making sure that we're a model for whatever's going on. And then the wrong size. We haven't really thought through how many people we need to do this, or, this was great. This was done at another company, but our company is a third of that size. So how are we going to transition that? Or this company was really small and we're really large. Asking all of those questions up front and before we go through a change initiative is critical. And then lastly, no follow through. We make this change, but we don't check in if anybody's actually done it. We don't look back and see where the objectives were met, which if you go back to that beginning slide, only 25% based on that survey that was done feel like the change objectives were met, probably because there was no follow through. We don't know if we were successful or not because we just hurried through the change. And I will tell you that in general, it takes 18 months to implement a change. And I will say that that is if everything is going really well. That is if all these things you see up here, you are doing really well. You've got the right people involved. You've got the support from high up. Everybody's moving in the right direction. 18 months. Because when you think about organizations, you're talking about people, and it takes people a bit of time to jump on board with change. And I'm going to share a little bit about that with you in a minute, so kind of understand how that breaks down, because some people are going to embrace it immediately, and then some you are really going to have to encourage and support them to get there. Another great thing to share, in the chats, I'd be curious, is just some of these myths about change that maybe you've said yourself, or you in fact have heard other people in the organization say. And this one is a very popular one, and I've said it myself, that this will go away. It's not permanent. I've said many times to myself, 2020 will be gone, come January 1st, come December 31st, we hit midnight, this thing is over. But there's going to be another change behind it. So yeah, this will go away, but change is constant. There's no life anymore without some type of change. It's going to help if I get upset about it. Not really. Again, I've tried a lot of these, and I'm just telling you it didn't work. So if we can keep people calm about it and bring them along, we're more likely to be successful with getting this change through. I can just keep doing my job as I've been. And I put that back on leadership. Where's the accountability? And if we make change an option, people are going to go back to the way that they've always done something. So we have to make sure that people understand that this is the new way. This is what we're doing moving forward. One of my best leaders, he would always say, you can like it, you can learn to like it, or you can leave it. And, that's really, at the end of the day with change, that's what we have. And I work with a lot of people that have opted to leave because they didn't like it. So they had to leave it. All these problems prove that change is bad for the organization. Often it's because we didn't change fast enough, or we changed too fast. When you think about 18 months, there's one organization that I've worked with for a number of years that comes to mind, and they don't let anything go longer than 3 months without changing it again. And the frustration in that organization is we haven't even had time to know if this was going to work. But anytime top leadership gets a sense of this is headed in the wrong direction, they will yank it and they will start doing something else. And, I've often challenged the leaders that I'm working with there to think about, we haven't really given it even enough time to know if this is going to work or not. And of course, if someone's disrupting your life and making it more complicated and we have to learn new skills, it's easy to go down the path of, leadership just doesn't care about us. They're trying to make life hard. Everybody is in a position to make a difference. And, I have the pleasure of working with every level of leadership generally when I go into organizations. And, even the frontline people, they have an opportunity to make a difference, because if they don't want this change to happen and we don't bring them on board, we can have some strong resistors and not get where we need to be successfully. So everybody always has a position to influence other people to do things, or to just be that positive attitude. Top management's responsible. Generally, top management, I say top leadership, is responsible for coming up with whatever this change might be. And that's because they've taken in the input of other people. But ultimately, it's the responsibility of the entire organization to make these work. And they don't know what they are doing. And I laugh because I will challenge when people will say this, and I hear a lot of people say this one. I'm like, who are they? And this will sometimes come from frontline or middle management, but they don't know what they are doing. And I'm like, well, who is they? Well, they, the top leadership. But I'm like, you're in leadership, so aren't you the they also? And it's very, not that they, don't them they. And I'm like, no, it's they. When we are in a leadership role, especially, we are part of the they. That's where the silos get divided. The organization can only be as successful as its most, unsuccessful person. So we all have a responsibility to help make something succeed. And then these changes weren't really necessary. I'm going to say that the reason why the myth of the changes weren't really necessary comes out, and that starts, going through the organization, and there's lots of chatter about that, is because we have not explained the why. And the why is the most often left out thing in a change initiative. And if you sit there and think about it, you almost have to laugh, because you're like, that should be the most important thing, is when we're implementing a change through an organization or even in your own department. Why are we doing this? And before people can even say yes or no, they've got to understand, why are we doing this? So at least if I understand why, I may not completely agree with it. I may not necessarily think we need to do this right now, but if I understand and there's a good explanation for it, I'm more likely to eventually come along with that change. So I wanted to share with you, and these came from a study done by Harvard Business Review, of the key indicators of effective change management. So when they went in and they looked at organizations in transition, they identified the following strengths that I'm going to share with you as key indicators of being able to successfully lead change, especially change through challenging times. And the first one is, you must be able to demonstrate the flexibility and resilience needed. And I look at this in organizations, and if you think about your leadership culture right now, if you had to think about, describe for me, if we were in a conversation, what does your leadership culture look like? Do they have these behaviors? Do they demonstrate these things? Because these are going to be your main change agents, are every level of leadership. Are they able to be flexible and resistant? How have people handled this year? And I say this to an HR group. I can't even tell you the number of people that I know in the HR roles that have left organizations this year because they were not able to be flexible and resilient in a year like no other. It was very stressful, and for many different reasons. But in order to be able to be successful with change, do you have that flexibility and resilience to bounce back for something? Are you able to adapt quickly? When you got that call middle of March that the world was going to look very different for quite a long time, or we don't even know how long, we're still in it. What did you do? Were you calm in the face of that adversity and flexible and just say, okay, we're going to sit down and figure it out. We've never gone through this, but we're going to come up with a plan, and thinking back now, think about how much smarter all of us are for having gotten through this year. The next thing is you recognize the growth opportunities in change, and you're constantly looking for ways to improve, and hopefully you're in a culture that is all about learning and demonstrating that skill to be able to help others resist that change. But, change is all about growth. Change is all about moving forward. And as I said, if we haven't had it done well, we don't trust and we don't necessarily want to go forward. Striving for results. This goes back to, performance improvement. Are we able to look at the organization and strive on improving everybody's performance at every level? And a little bit of Brene Brown in this one, leading courageously, because you will be met with resistance with change. This is not something that I can tell you, everyone is going to love. And I know each of you as HR people, you've lived change. You're probably sitting here thinking, yes, I know what you're talking about because I've gone through some of these things. But it really is about being courageous when people resist it. And when people come up with reasons why we shouldn't do it and, share dissenting opinions, are we able to take that in? Are we able to listen to that? Are we able to handle that conflict? Because the conflict is necessary. We need to listen to the voices and why they're frustrated. Because if we don't, and we try to just keep moving forward, it goes back to another reason why, the change doesn't fail is we're not listening to our people. And then gaining buy-in. Are you able to do that? And with this particular one, I mentioned the meeting before the meeting, and I didn't really understand what that was until I got into grad school. But, the meeting before the meeting is generally the most important meeting, where we're out there getting buy-in for this change. We're developing relationships. We're talking to the right people who are going to be most impacted. We've got top leader buy-in for it. So when we go in to announce the change or put this change together, pretty much the decision has already been made, because everybody's on board with it and everybody knows. But that gain in buy-in really does cause you to have to get out of the comfort zone of just, okay, well, I think this is best for the organization. And a couple of people said they like it. No, gaining buy-in means getting all of that, holistic perspective from as many as we can in the organization. And then, whatever feedback they have, taking that in and listening to it and adjusting where we can. So another piece that I want to share with you around change is emotional intelligence. And this is something that has been around from, I believe it's in the early 90s. I just saw, coincidentally, they interviewed Daniel Goleman on the Today Show on Monday, and he's, the guru of emotional intelligence. But he was talking about, that this skill set is critical for leadership effectiveness, not only for in general leadership effectiveness, but when we are leading change, it is critical that we are leading it in an emotionally intelligent way. So I thought it was important for those of you that may not be as familiar with emotional intelligence is, to first understand that EI accounts for 85 to 95% of the success of organizational leaders. So those that lack it are going to have, more of a challenge doing anything successfully, because all of these things are necessary to be able to lead. But when it comes to leading change, for so many different reasons that we've already talked about, you have to have emotional intelligence. You have to be able to kick into that. And, the good thing is that it can be learned. I, as a leadership coach and trainer, I'm teaching this all the time. And it is very challenging for certain personalities that this is not necessarily their first gift. They're amazing when it comes to analysis or tactics. They can, build you a process, build you a plan up and down, all the way around, and it's a great plan. But unless they have the ability to bring people along with that plan, then they're not going to be truly successful. So the 4 components of emotional intelligence is, first of all, self-awareness and self-management. So it starts with us. Self-awareness, self-management, that's where EI starts. And self-awareness is, are we just aware of our own responses to things? And if we don't control our emotions will control us. So, when talking about that gaining buy-in and listening to when people resist change, we have to be aware if we get really upset about that, or, we take it personally. It starts with being able to monitor and adjust accordingly to those emotions. The other 2 pieces of that are the social awareness. So once we are self-aware and we can, modify our own behaviors and we can be in tune with all of that, we are now able to outwardly go and be able to monitor that for other people and look at how they are responding, because we're not all in our own head. We have a really good handle on that. And then we're able to help socially manage that too. So we're able to more successfully interact with other people because we're paying attention to how they are responding. and what do they need and how am I going to be able to give that to them? But as I said, unless we've been able to tap into that for ourselves and we understand our own emotions around things, it is going to be very challenging for us to be able to help others do that as well. So I love this. We may not have a say in the change, and normally we don't. It just happens. In organizations this year, the change is thrust upon us and we're asked to take it away and make it happen. But we do have total control over how we react to it. So, we can resist it for as long as we can. And as I said, I've watched people try to resist this year, and it often ended in them having to leave their roles because, they were going to have to get on board with it, or if not, get on board somewhere else. Or we can embrace it. And I've found that just some of these simple things that we're talking about this afternoon is all around helping first ourselves embrace it. And then once we've been able to successfully embrace that, then we can help others in the organization embrace it as well. So some strategies around that. So emotional intelligence strategies to embrace change. So if it's, emotional intelligence for some of us, if that's something that I could work on that, I could be a little bit better with that, or in roles as HR, being coaches for your leaders in the organization and helping those that this, again, may not be their first gift and struggling with it. But when we're looking at ourselves first, before we're going to lead the change, it's important for you to understand your own source of resistance. So if you know that you're somebody, like we've talked about, that just quickly will resist change, it doesn't matter what it is, that first pass across your head, you're thinking of all the reasons why it won't work. What is the source of that? And, I've told you, I made the connection with, my brother-in-law and cooking and food. And when I've had it and I didn't like it, I've already now got this thing in my head where I don't like it. And it doesn't matter. It gets very hard to convince me of otherwise. And I've really, really tried hard to know that about myself. And so when I resist change, I go back for myself to, it's because there's been so many times this hasn't been done well, but this isn't that time. I need to give this time a chance. I need to give this time the opportunity. I need to listen. I need to learn. I need to know what I need to do. So, but that starts with you, because you've got to identify that for yourself first before you can start going out and helping others identify that as well. And then questioning the basis of your emotional response. What is your primary emotion associated with this change? Is it anger? Is it fear? Is it frustration? The one organization I work with, it's because they're changing every 3 months. So, they're getting mad because they're just about to get the last person that was resisting on board. And then there's a whole nother change. So just understanding our own emotional frustrations around this can, again, help us with helping other people identify that too. And owning your part in it. It is extremely important when we're in HR roles and leadership roles, is that, we look at why aren't a group of people coming along with us? Well, maybe it's because we haven't been the best sellers of it. Maybe instead of, telling, we do need to sell a little bit. Have we been positive? And I know in my early years of leadership at UPS, I look back on some of that and I understand now why some certain things failed, because I was frustrated. I did not own my resistance and my emotional responses. And I would verbally tell my team that I didn't think this was a good idea and I didn't want to do it. But then I realized I was in a role, I had to get past it. I had to move on. I had to do it. Well, I had a team full of people going, why? Because you said you didn't like it. You didn't want to do it. And now you're asking us to do it. So what is our part in this? If there's any part of failure happening, what could we be doing to influencing that? And just, taking that and owning that for yourselves, because your attitude as a leader is so contagious. It is so contagious. It's as contagious as any virus. People will watch you and follow you and model it accordingly. So own your part in, what are you out there modeling? And then turning up your positive outlook, asking yourself, what are the opportunities with this change? And that is now the first question that I ask myself before I let myself go down to the path of this isn't going to work out, or I have this fear of failure because I don't know what I'm doing. And, as I said in the beginning, my whole world shifted, as many of your worlds did, back in March, where I wasn't really set up to 100% do all my coaching and training via Zoom or Microsoft Teams virtually. But I figured it out. And I said to myself, after about 3 weeks of, like most of us, this overwhelming sense, okay, what do I got to do to make this happen? Where are the opportunities in that? And there have been so many opportunities with that. And how are these opportunities going to help me? And how is it going to help other people? How are we going to be able to touch more people because of this, or et cetera, whatever it is? But really just making sure we try to see the positive in it. But starting with that question first is important, I have found, for me. Now, this is an interesting one that I want to share with you, because it's good to know, because as we're going through and we are leading change in our organization, we need to understand this 20-30-50 rule. And for some of you, you may be familiar with this, but I wasn't as much until now when I go into organizations and I'm like, oh, yep, they're part of this group, that group. It's just important to know who you have in your camp, who is definitely not in your camp, and who is undecided about all of this. So in general, you are going to have 20% of your organization that is change friendly. And these are going to be your people that if you tell them on a Monday something is going to change on a Tuesday, they're just like, I'm with ya, that's great. I didn't like the other way anyway, or maybe this way is going to be better. Then you're going to have 30% that it doesn't matter how amazing this change is. It just doesn't matter. They are going to say, it's awful, it's bad. Why are you ruining our lives? Why are you changing this? This doesn't make any sense. And then you're going to have 50% that's sitting on the fence, not decided yet. So it's too soon to tell. The vote hasn't been cast yet. And why this is important to know with your teams, with your organization, and especially in the HR role, is because you want to try to minimize the impact that the 30% has on the 50%. You want to get as much as you can, the 20% out there. If you know that the 20% is bought in to this idea, how can you help get them to be influencers in your own organization? How can you get them out there talking to the 50% before the 30% sells them on, this is a complete bad idea, we shouldn't go about doing it? And when I found that out, it really helped me assess which groups do we need to focus on. And we need to focus on all of them, but what we need to focus on for each of them is a bit different. So if you think about that and you kind of look for signs for it, you will be able to figure out these groups of people somewhat easily once you've connected with your leadership teams and talked through some of this. So once you have an idea of that, and some of you may recognize this resistance profile, it's the stages of grieving. And when I learned about this when I was going through change management training, I thought this was one of the most brilliant things to explain around change. Because for something to begin, something has to end, something has to die. So when we're changing something in an organization, we're asking people to let go of ways that we've done things, in some instances, I find, for a really, really long time. So while we might not think changing where people sit is a big deal, and I've lived through this one personally, it caused this whole depression among many people of, we've always had this spot. This has been our spot, but the organization was remodeling, thinking through, okay, I didn't think something like that would be such a big deal, but it was the ending of something to start something new, a fresh look. So what I have done with teams, with my own teams, when I was working internally with organization, and then as I do now as the external coming into the organization, I will put up, on a flip chart or on a whiteboard, or you can even put this up on the screen for those of you who have the big screens, and I will give everybody a Post-it note. And I will ask them to go up and put onto this curve where they are feeling right now about the change. So, and generally this will be at the point where a change has been announced, because we don't always, again, have the luxury of being involved in every stage of it. But if there's a big change happening in your organization, this can really give you a chance to look at where's my team right now? And what you're going to find is that you have people all over this, where you might have thought that you had a whole group of people that were just in denial and anger about this. And yes, you will have that 30% somewhere in that. But then you can also tell where, your 20% is, that they're on board, they're like, yeah, it's no big deal. We'll get through it. And then you can kind of tell, maybe where my fence sitters are. But this is a great opportunity to allow your team the time and space to share their emotions around how they're feeling about this change. And, for me, it goes back to that emotional intelligence piece of, first getting into our own heads about this and understanding it, but then opening up that opportunity and understanding that if we don't let people grieve, if we don't let people feel the emotional part of change, it is really hard to get them on board later because they haven't felt heard. And that's so much of how I've lived changes. That's been that way. I come in and this is the change and this is the way that we're going to do it. And, I don't even want to hear if you have any commentary, because this, this isn't really a choice you have in this. We always have a choice to listen and learn. We always have a choice to listen and learn. And at the end of it, it may still be that we have to go about and we have to implement whatever this change is. But I have found that people that at least get to talk about their emotions with it, get to just, tell you that they're angry about this and they're in denial about this, they will eventually move past and they will eventually come on board. And, even though we don't always have a say in what the change is itself, most of the time we do have some say on the execution of it in our own department. Often we get goals that come down, but each department has to decide how is our team going to contribute to those goals? What's our team going to do? So similar to that with change, we have this change coming down, but how is our department going to live this? How is our department going to support that? And some of that dialogue can begin to come out once we get past where people are feeling emotionally about the change. So the handout that we showed you at the beginning that you were sent previous to this meeting, and for some of you, if you've been putting in chat your email, hopefully you were able to get access to that. But this goes along with the handout. And I'm going to share with you, and the handout assesses these things. It's a change agent self-assessment. I'm going to encourage you as a takeaway from today's discussion, assess yourself as a change agent. How are you doing? And it is based on these 6 things that I'm going to share with you here, just give you an overview of it. 6 traits of a truly successful change agent. First of all, you've got to know the benefits that change is going to bring. And if you don't know what those benefits are, ask, find out. It's like going to buy something from somebody and they can't tell you about all the amazing features about it. So you're thinking to yourself, why do I want to buy this? People are buying change. So make sure that you know the bigger picture. Make sure you know how this is going to benefit each individual. It's going to benefit the organization overall so that you can successfully sell it. Stay inside with that human side of the change. And that's where we tap into that emotional intelligence. It's critically important that we stay in touch with that and we let people have an emotional response to it because often we don't. It's just so tactical, so process driven, but it's so much more than that when we change something. So make sure that we stay connected to that as a change agent when we're leading it. Will so help you be successful in the future. But we also have to balance that with the focus on the bottom line. So we give people the space and time to grieve it, to feel it. But as I said, we either like it, learn to like it, or leave it. And those are our choices. So at the end of the day, if we have created the space for people, and we've done all that we can to encourage, to support, to provide resources, if someone doesn't want to be there, if someone wants to stay in that 30%, then those may be some hard choices that we have to have, because ultimately we have to implement this. We have to make it happen. And then embodying the change. Are you walking the talk? And that's really what embodying the change means. So if we're asking people to do something, are you doing it too? Making sure that as much as we can, we're modeling it. And when we don't, we own it. We take accountability for it. Number 5, open up the process. This to me is when we listen and learn. So we have this change that we're going through. We open it up and we listen to what people have to say with it. Say about it. Maybe we did miss some conversations. Maybe we did miss involving some of the right people in it, but can we go back and can we do, that whole activity that I shared with you where we get people's emotions out and we're able to talk about it, that we're not we're right. And this is the way we're going to do it. So everybody just needs to be quiet and just do it. And then number 6, make sure you don't forget what's great about the organization already, because often when change happens, some people's internal voice will be, we're not good enough. We haven't been, so we're not good enough anymore. So we've got to change so that we can be better. What made your business great? Make sure that you celebrate that, because whatever has existed until now was a foundational piece of how you've gotten to where you are today. So making sure that you celebrate that and you don't dismiss that, we've never been good. We have been really good. But in today's world, if we don't evolve, we are not going to be here. Nobody today can stay the way that they were and still be in business. Especially not this year. If any other year did not rock an organization, regardless of your industry, it was this year. But you have to also remember, we got here because we've done some things really, really well. So let's celebrate that. Let's build on that. And let's move forward and take that into this change. So the other piece that I've given you on the back of the change agent self-assessment. So when you're going through rating yourself, you will be rating yourself on those 6 things that I just shared with you. So I'm going to encourage you to pick a goal for yourself. And I also want you, though, to look at which one of those 6 is your gift, is your strength. So when you look at those and you say, oh, I'm really good about the human side of it. I'm really good about making sure people get to talk, emotions, but I maybe need to be better about opening up the process and letting them talk more about it, or letting them have some ideas about how we do that, whatever it is. But I do want you to make sure that you identify what is your strength in those change agent traits. And then I also have given you your game plan for success. Which one of those traits would be the best for you to focus on? Which one of them would help you be more successful in being a change agent and helping people lead through change? Because as I said, I believe that it's important to balance both of those things. We have to know where we're good, and we also have to know where we have opportunities to be better. And that's whole self-awareness piece. And it's critical that we have that when it comes to dealing with and leading change. So I love this quote from Rosalind Carter, is that a leader takes people where they want to go, but a great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be. And I believe that each one of us have the opportunity to be great change agents. I believe that each one of us have the opportunity, as my brother-in-law, to prepare something so amazingly well that even if somebody has had it done very, very poorly in the past, when they step in and they embrace what it is that we are offering, that they come to find that it isn't so bad and they actually like it. And, those are really the key things around change, is just, being aware of all the emotional side of it, is letting people talk through it, but also making sure that when we're building the plan for change, that we are taking all of these things into consideration, and that we just don't go forward and somebody's got a great idea and we implement it. That's where those misstarts happen. But I encourage you as HR role models, as HR leaders, to make sure when you're sitting down with the higher levels of leadership, because generally that's where this starts, if it's a large organizational change, that they are taking these things into mind. Because this, I don't find, is taught in any CEO school that people go through. We generally learn how to do some of this just by going through it. But now, as Maya Angelou says, now that we know better, we do better. And if we know that we can do change better, even if there's a change going on right now that maybe some of these things weren't happening, it's never too late to go back, press the pause button for a minute, and how can we start adding some of these things in to be more successful? So I wish each one of you on your change journey much success. And I feel so good every time I'm able to share this information with you, because I know I'm not alone out there in the world, selling all of this, because it really can make an incredible change, not only in organizations, but for the people that work in those organizations. So if I can ever be of service to you along your change journey or your leadership journey, my contact information is up there. Please reach out for me and just say, hey, Hope, do you have any resources, or, is there anything else you can share? And speaking of resources, I do have a leadership e-newsletter that I put out once a month. And if you are at all interested in being on that mail list, you can just shoot me an email and let me know. I'll be happy to add you. There's often articles that I will share with you that I come across on change. Because as I said, we're all going through it, and let's not waste the learning opportunity that 2020 has provided us in the midst of all of the things that have not gone well. Let's not forget to look for the things that we learned, the things that did go well, and take that into 2020 and make ourselves and our organizations even better. So thank you so much. And I know we have a couple of minutes left. So if there are any questions that I can entertain, please let me know. And if you think of anything after this that you would love, to ask me, or as I said, please email me and I will be happy to get back to you.
Okay, the floor is open for any questions. If you'd like to unmute and ask, or put those in the chat. Don't see anything currently. We have some thank yous, and absolutely, Hope, we thank you so much for your time and your presentation today. We truly appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. This is very timely information, and I'm sure everyone will find it useful and will reach out to you if they have any questions. And especially, I like the idea of your electronic newsletter. So that's great.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. just as a point of business, we'll be sending out the HRCI and SHRM codes after this presentation. So you'll receive those either this afternoon or sometime this week. And with that, we want to wish everyone a happy holiday season and take care. And we look forward to seeing all of you next year, and hopefully hope you'll come back and visit with us again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Happy holidays to everyone, and the happiest and healthiest of a new year.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be well.